order the regular meeting of the Board of Directors, Conejo Recreation and Park District for March 20th, 2025. If you would please join me in our flag salute. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And would the clerk of the board please call the roll?
Director Nichols.
Yes.
Director Cussworth.
Yes.
Director Huffer.
Yes.
Director Buss.
Yes.
Director Orozco.
Yes.
Thank you. And next item is special presentations, and I don't believe we have any. And next is items from the public, and I do have one speaker card for Logan Kennett, I'm sorry, if you please join us at the podium. And you're welcome to tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Logan Kennett. I'm a resident of Newbury Park. I would first like to thank the board for all they've done through the Rexham Park District for our local parks and for hearing me today. A couple of weeks ago, Borchard Park instituted a blanket ban on high school students parking in the lot during school hours. I understand this ban was put in place to combat reckless driving. And the tipping point was a teenager doing donuts and almost hitting someone. This teenager does not attend school at Newbury Park High School. And I'm here today to inform you this ban is unfair, unjust, and prohibited according to California United States law. When I tried to park there and didn't state my student status, I was still threatened with towing. I was still threatened with towing. Since you are assuming student status simply based on age, this is a civil rights violation that goes against the Age Discrimination Act of 1975 and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Because of these assumptions without evidence, I have no legal obligation to state my student status. This is an unenforceable rule, and any fines incurred can be thrown out for lack of evidence. I encourage you to lift the ban and remove the signs at Borchard Park by Monday, March 24th, 2025, or my peers and I will be contacting the Department of Justice, the California Civil Rights Department, the American Civil Liberties Union, and local news outlets. Additionally, we intend to fight any tickets or fines given to us under that rule. Thank you again for hearing me, and have a nice day.
Thank you. I don't have any other cards here. Do we have anybody online that wishes to speak to the board? Okay. All right. Then we'll proceed. Thank you. Next item is approval of the agenda. If there's any board members wishing to modify the agenda, if not, a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second for that?
second it.
Thank you. A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that covers. We'll stick with the agenda as presented. Next is our consent calendar regarding the minutes and the warrants. Any comments, edits, modifications, and if not, a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, we move the consent calendar. We have no deferred matters, which brings us to our items for discussion. So we have some guests with us this evening. General Manager Friedel, would you care just to introduce the topic and also our guests?
Sure. Tonight we are very fortunate to have a few folks from the city with us. Akbar Ali Khan is a assistant city manager and has been the lead for the downtown campus master plan project, which is going to be the subject of the presentation. And joining Akbar is Jamie Boscarino, the finance director, and Jonathan Surratt, I don't know the exact new title, but I know it's the libraries and the theaters now. So is it Cultural and Community Services Director for the city? So no, so it's three folks that we've had the pleasure of working with for many years. And maybe I'll do a little preamble to what this is all about. So the Park District and the city have many good and longstanding partnerships. Probably the oldest, longest, most visible is the Casca JPA, where we've actually created a whole separate entity. And then we have the teen and the senior center. And this Hillcrest Center for the Arts is actually, as you guys know, we're on a city property and a city building that was born out of a longstanding three-way partnership between the city, the park district, and the Arts Council. So, we were at the Jan's house at one time, fortunate 22 years ago, 23 years ago to come here. And, the evolution and 2027 is the end of that lease term, and the city is also working on the downtown master plan. So there might be, opportunities for us to continue a partnership in this regard. So I guess with that, turn it over to Akbar and you'll kind of let us know what's going on with the downtown project.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you, members of the board. Pardon the mask. I'm on the back end of a cold. I'm socially distanced. I felt it was safe to remove it, or else I would have come up and shaken your hand earlier. I was here roughly a year ago. For those of you that were here that evening, I shared kind of where we were with the downtown project. It's been a busy 12 months. The goal for tonight and chatting with Jim prior to this meeting was just to update the board on kind of where we're at. Of course, there are conversations around what that means for the Conejo Recreation and Park District. Jim has been thankfully gave us a few questions that some of the board members had in advance, so we can come prepared with some of those answers in hand. And for some of those, we may not have answers at this moment. But as Jim mentioned, I brought two of my colleagues along with me, our finance director, Damien Boscarino, and community and cultural services director, Jonathan Surratt. I'm going to handle the first part of this, and then I'm going to hand the mic to Jonathan and then Jamie to wrap us up. We'll talk about just kind of where we're at in current status, a little bit about the project schedule, because I know that actually touches on some of the questions the board had. We'll talk about the adaptive reuse program, and really that's just kind of a fancy term for the existing city hall and what we plan to do with it, adaptively reuse it for something else. Jonathan will talk about that. Jamie will present a framework for a rental estimate. I would just want to caution the board not to take this too literally, because we are talking about the year 2025, and this wouldn't really come to fruition until much, much later. But again, it's simply to introduce a framework, because I know that's top of mind for the board as well. So a little bit about the project background. I know all of you have had some familiarity with what the downtown project is about, but for anyone listening online or listening to this later, I just want to give a little bit more background. I always love leading with this image because it just shows how long we've been talking about some version of a downtown in Thousand Oaks. This was a drawing dating back to 1987. In the middle there is Thousand Oaks Boulevard. On both ends of that sketch are Conejo School Road on the right and then Herbs Road on the far left. But we've been talking about creating a downtown for several decades. Of course, what got built in 1994 didn't resemble this. It was the first swing at creating a real community asset in the Civic Arts Plaza. Now, 30 years later, we're taking a look and seeing how do we best complement that asset and really that investment that the city and our community made 30 years ago. Just to orient everyone with the program from right to left, one big difference I'll point out is this introduction of a main street running right through the middle of the program. It's inset from Thousand Oaks Boulevard. It's not meant to be an arterial. It's meant to be a very walkable, bikeable street. In fact, the portion of Main Street that is east of Dallas Drive, a lot of the feedback we have heard from some of our community conversations have asked, why don't we just close that off to cars entirely? Have that be only for pedestrian and bicycle use? The other big difference is Dallas Drive, instead of feeding all the way to the lower parking lot, which you don't see there any longer, and to the existing parking structure, that now comes to a T intersection with Main Street. And the new street, which swings along back, is now your primary entrance into the existing parking garage. So that area in orange, that is the existing City Hall, of course. Jonathan will talk a little bit about how that's going to be adaptively reused. That houses all of our city operations today. One of the key goals is to get off of the ground floor, which today houses nearly 70% of our staff. It's our Public Works Department and Community Development Department, and commercialize those spaces, activate them for public use, and then move the city operation into a new building just to the west of us. And if you're looking at those two boxes and wondering why is the blue box a heck of a lot smaller than the orange one, is because we're taking a very horizontal city hall, turning it on its side and making it more vertical with a smaller footprint. These boxes that you see off to the side, the areas in green, these are mixed use buildings that the city would likely entitle and then partner with a private developer to go ahead and actually build and operate. The one change that has been discussed more recently is that proposed public market, instead of being out on as its own standalone pad, actually bringing that into the area in orange, the adaptive reuse. In fact, that's one of our core concepts or key tenets for that adaptively reused space. What that does is it provides us a really nice opportunity to turn that into a true town square, which is what we felt the program was missing. This concept is a year old. We're going to have new visuals to share with the community in just a few weeks, so really excited about that. But that's going to be, I think, a nice change to this concept from nearly a year ago. This entire effort is about creating a downtown. The area in orange on screen, that represents the 20 acres on which the Civic Arts Plaza sits on, as well as the west side parcel. It is not nearly large enough to constitute a downtown all by itself. It's not meant to be. The idea behind the downtown project is to catalyze reinvestment across the boulevard to create a downtown. The areas in purple, the dark purple there, are meant to signify all the parcels that fit within a quarter-mile walk of the Civic Arts Plaza. Quarter-mile walk is kind of the magic number that a lot of urban planners use to kind of signify your downtown core. The larger yellow circle represents a half-mile radius, and those typically represent the extremities of a downtown. And that takes you all the way from nearly Rancho Road all the way out to Oakview Drive, right by the 24-hour fitness. So the area that we're focused on for this effort is really the downtown core in the dark purple, and primarily our site in orange. These images, you probably have seen these before. In fact, when I was here last, I may have shared a few of these. These are, again, almost a year old. We're going to have new visuals to share in just a few weeks. In fact, this would be, if you're hovering above the Lassen's Market looking to the west, this would be the view that you see. The public market, of course, I just mentioned, that wouldn't be out there. That would now be kind of a programmable pad that we could use for a variety of different events. That use would move inside the building that's on the left, which is the existing City Hall. In the lower left corner is an amphitheater, more of your intimate style amphitheater, nothing like the Santa Barbara Bowl. This is probably seating for 250 people or so. But this could be used for daytime, nighttime activities, could be used for private events, or just when it's not being programmed, a place where you could hang out and enjoy your lunch or any other things throughout the day. I mentioned the closed portion of Main Street earlier. This is maybe what it could look like. Curbless design, really accessible. That bottom area of City Hall, which today is kind of a sea of cubicles for our staff. Of course, those would be open storefronts. In fact, the public market I described would likely be housed there. But this is a walkable, bikeable, kind of a lovely stroll through an urban setting. This is high above Thousand Oaks Boulevard, looking down onto the program. Of course, one thing you might notice here is the decks around our lovely oak trees on the site. We want to celebrate and preserve those. And then the addition of a staircase that connects us from that Main Street all the way up to the Cavalier Terrace on the third floor. Vertical connectivity is something that is sorely lacking from that site today if you've been to a show there and tried to get down to the boulevard. There's been two main city council actions this past year, and I want to share with the board both of those. The first one was in May of 2024. So at the end of the conceptual stage, which is when all those renderings I just shared with you were developed, we went to the council and said, hey, based on your direction, based on community feedback to date, here are the renderings. Are we on the right track? Do you want to take this from a concept into design? They gave us their blessing in May of 2024 and said, go ahead. We went out and issued an RFP for design services. And then we took that to City Council in December of 2024, which is that Ventura County Star article on the right half of the screen. And Council greenlit us to the tune of about $6 million, $5 million for design, and then $1 million in other support services. So the way the team is structured, we have 4 teams under this design umbrella. And there's 4 parts to this program. When we think about managing it, there's the site plan, all of the oak trees and the walkways, the plaza space. That's the team in green there. And then there's the new City Hall team. They're designing that new City Hall building, the smaller footprint one that was a bit taller. They're the ones in blue. The adaptive reuse team, Jonathan will talk about that. They're talking about how to reuse the existing City Hall. And the last team is the mixed use team. They're developing all those those mixed use buildings of ground floor commercial and residential up above. So they're all working in in parallel with one another under this umbrella of the entire design team. And they have design workshop about once a month. So we've been meeting with them, and they'll come in at key intervals, and we'll talk about their progress at each of these design workshops. And these are several hours in length. And each one of them kind of follows the same trajectory. And then in between these design workshops, we'll have a full team design charrette to make sure that what you're working on isn't affecting the thing I'm working on, so they can kind of compare notes and keep the model accurate and live. And then all of this work is going to culminate in an application to the city at the end of June, where we would actually submit an application just like any private developer would, and then run through the environmental process. Right now, we are in between design workshops 3. We just finished design workshop 3, and so we're getting ready for this last charrette before heading into design workshop 4. But the idea is, as you go through these design workshops, the project starts to bake. That by the time you get to design workshop number 4, you're not making these big moves anymore. It's a bit more solidified. This is where we are in the project right now. I know you can't read all the tiny detail on there, but suffice it to say, we've been in this intense design period for about 7 weeks now, and we're heading into an area where we're getting ready for council workshops up ahead. I'm hoping you've seen this graphic before, because we tried to advertise it everywhere. In fact, I think a lot of your staff, a couple of your board members attended a couple of these. Really well attended. We had about 175 residents in total attend each of the 5 sessions combined. We took away some really cool feedback. We had a graphic recorder that she did this in real time, and if you attended this, it was like mesmerizing just watching her. It was pretty cool. And it became kind of a way to capture all of the ideas. Of course, we couldn't accommodate every single one of them. Some of them were contradictory. Some of them were pie in the sky. Others were more based in reality. It was lovely. It was exactly what we could have hoped for from these conversations. So this was our 3rd one on the visitor experience and business mix. 4th one was sustainability. The final one was on accessibility and disabled access. But we took away a ton of things that we could then incorporate back into the next iteration of the design. Here are some key themes we took, and there were probably dozens, but I'm just going to highlight these 5. Culture, food, music, and art is likely to be the economic driver or the differentiator for this site. If you want to go buy a new t-shirt, a new pair of shoes, this is probably not the site to go do that. The Oaks Mall and the Jans Mall are going to be much better destinations for general merchandising. There's a strong desire for diverse art, something that I know this board is very well acquainted with, but also a desire to broaden and diversify the art from what we've had historically. That's not to say we want to celebrate the art that we have done quite successfully, but also then kind of introduce other forms of art. 3rd one, and I mentioned this town square earlier, by allowing that space to not be built on, we actually create this nice programmable space that'll help fulfill all the unmet requests on a more rotational basis. So we had ideas that maybe we couldn't find a permanent home for them inside the building, but it would make for a great pop-up on that plaza. There were several ideas that we heard along those lines. So that now creates an opportunity for that. The next one, a willingness to explore other modes of transportation. Right now, Thousand Oaks Boulevard, if you ride your bike on it, you're probably looking over your shoulder a lot. I think there's a desire to make it a little bit easier to access. Of course, you got to take baby steps. You start with the area directly on the frontage, and then over time, as the boulevard starts to change over, you can expand that treatment to the east and west. But it wasn't just bikes. It was a strong desire for rideshare. Especially if you're a resident of Thousand Oaks and you're coming to the downtown, that fare is actually pretty reasonable. A lot about electric bikes, e-bikes, and having the ability to charge them, replenish your juice, and then not have to pedal as hard on your way back home. There were things I learned about just in these sessions I'd never heard about. And the last one is, I think this goes without saying, is there were just so many ideas, and perhaps more ideas than we could actually accommodate. I'm going to go over the project schedule, because I think this touches on yet another question as it relates to the CRPD operation and what options that you may have in front of you. In the immediate term, these are a few council dates, or not just council dates, but milestone dates in front of us. We're going to finish that last charrette I just mentioned a few slides ago. We'll have 2 city council workshops, one on April 8th, another on May 13th. We'll have a community open house in between then on May 7th, where we're going to share some updated renderings. They'll be hot off the press, just like we did last year, where we opened the share forum up one evening and just had people walk around. We opened up for maybe 3 hours, and people could strike up conversations, not structured in any way, more of a drop-in format. So we'll do that on May 7th. And then I mentioned that application that'll go in towards the end of June. This is now more of a long-term milestones for the project. Once we turn in that application, I'm going to skip down to line 3, the environmental review. We're going to spend a year roughly in environmental review. That's just how long an EIR takes. With the intention of coming back to Planning Commission and City Council in the spring of 2026, likely May and June of 2026. Going down to construction, this is a long project. I mean, this is a sizable one and one that takes significant amount of planning and design. So when you look at that last date there, 2032, it feels a ways off, as it should. The reason why there's that little delay between the rest of the buildings and the adaptive reuse is the city operation needs to shift into its new home before we start performing open heart surgery on the existing city hall. So it's more just an order of operations. But we're looking at 2032. And I know one of the questions that Jim had forwarded me is when it comes to any transaction regarding this space, which is something that the council still has not yet considered, we wouldn't have to vacate any portion of this property until that time. Even if we were to transact ahead of 2032, there's lease back provisions that we would engage with any potential future buyer. So we can certainly talk about that more if the board has questions at the end. Just a little bit about phasing and how we'd actually physically construct this. It would be done in a few phases. First, we would construct this new access road because we're getting rid of Dallas Drive. We would then reconstruct the portion of Dallas Drive and West Main Street, and then continue that treatment to the east and some of those, what we're calling East Main Street, the pedestrianized portion. Kind of parallel to that, we would then have the mixed-use buildings constructed kind of part and parcel to that. They don't need to go sequentially. They can go concurrently. And then lastly would be the adaptive reuse. As I mentioned, we need to move into the new home before doing any major construction on that building. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Jonathan Surrett, and I'll be waiting in the wings here if there's any questions near the end.
Sanitize my hands after, I guess. It's fine. Good evening, Chair Nichols and board members. So this part of the presentation is about that adaptive reuse. It's about how do we take the existing city hall structure and utilize it in a way that really benefits our community and complements what we already have existing on the site, and really focuses on what we want this part of downtown to really be so that we can thrive in terms of our operations. So what you're looking at here is a diagram of the existing floor level. It's level 1 of City Hall currently. You'll notice on the left-hand side, we have restaurant entertainment space, and on the right-hand side, a public market. The restaurant and entertainment space is actually currently our community development department. As you saw in the renderings, there would be a grand staircase that would allow us that upward connectivity between the ground level of the downtown project and going all the way up to the second and third levels, up to the theater terraces. And then where our current public works department is, that would become our public market, where we have the ability to bring in smaller vendors from the community who maybe don't necessarily have the resources to invest in significant brick and mortar buildings, but maybe still would be able to have an operation that could be confined into a public market that would still be able to service the community and provide them growth for their own individual operations. There's ways in which we can incorporate public art. You notice here there's a very nondescript art piece in the middle. The city recently adopted an art in public places policy as part of our arts and culture element of the general plan, and incorporating public art into our community is something that our council has given us direction to do and that we are passionate about. On level 2, which of the City Hall building, this is where we incorporate office space and administrative space for CRPD. This is currently are tenant spaces. It's where our human resources department is. The supervisor's office is currently there. And then as well, on the other part of the campus, we incorporate spaces for arts incubator and business incubator, recognizing that we have a tremendous opportunity here to make space available at a reasonable way to our community, to be able to invest in our community if they are not necessarily able to outlay that capital upfront for large brick and mortar places. Supporting our business sector, supporting our arts sector is incredibly important. These are high contributors to our creative economy, to our local economy, and making sure that we're supporting those businesses and potential employees is a significant lift. You'll notice here the stairs continue on up, and that's our upward connectivity. That blue circle in the middle is actually designed out as a skylight. Doesn't necessarily indicate any particular shape. It's just a placeholder. And on level 3, this is the part that I get really excited about. So my role as Cultural and Community Services Director is to oversee theaters, libraries, and community services. For the majority of my time with the city, however, it's been with the theaters department or the cultural affairs department. The reason why I get excited about this is this program affords us an opportunity to better service the community in terms of our arts and culture offerings, and to really significantly become closer partners with your cultural unit as well. We have a great relationship with your cultural unit and are greatly appreciative of the work that is being done here at the Hillcrest Center. So where I envision this going is bridging that gap, making us even closer in our connectivity. This affords us the use of an outdoor event space on top of what is currently our dry fountain. The drought put an end to the beautiful fountain there, and this is an opportunity for us to incorporate an outdoor event space that could be serviced with food and beverage, but also play a role in for attendees coming to shows, to be able to spend some time outdoors prior to or during intermission, or even sometimes after a show. This is directly across from the Kavli Theater. You'll notice on the left-hand side, there is an earmark for a black box theater. That is 9,210 square feet, estimated. Nothing is in concrete yet. This is in the existing city manager's office part of the City Hall building. The reason why this location is ideal for the black box theater is it actually allows us an opportunity to raise the roof on the building and incorporate a higher ceiling height, which for a black box theater would then give us, not to get too technical, but it actually gives us much better lighting positions. We can have a little bit more clearance for set pieces, etc. So this portion, you'll notice as I click through, there's a couple of iterations of what this could potentially look like. The black box theater itself, right now in this diagram, is on that northeast corner of that office building. That is actually the city manager's office, or part of it. But that rectangle as a whole, we can shift some of these pieces around, and actually one of the diagrams that I'm going to get to better clearly defines that. This is what I was speaking of. So entering into the third floor, the city manager's office, this is the black box theater. This is the complex as a whole. This incorporates a rehearsal space. It incorporates some dressing room spaces and back of house operations. Centering the black box a little closer to the sheer forum actually makes more sense. It gives us a little bit more insulation from the streets as a black box theater. We want to make sure that we are able to control our lighting and ambient lighting from outside. So the idea here is to be a little closer to the sheer forum. In all, this puts a significant focus and spotlight on the arts in our community. This really highlights an opportunity for us to make downtown a central part of our arts offerings for the community, for the region. And, you know, we work in close partnership. Oftentimes when we have renters who come to the venues to see about using the Kavli or the Sheer Forum, sometimes the Sheer Forum is actually too big for them, and we do refer them over to your cultural unit here at CRPD. Or when we have, you know, if dates aren't available, we actually refer them over as well. though your theater is in constant use and there's not a whole lot of availability either. So these are some renderings that are more updated of what the potential of this part of the campus can be. You'll notice that the front facades are more transparent, they're clear, they're allowing a lot more of that ambient lighting. That could be important, especially in the support services for the black box. This allows ambient lighting from outside for the rehearsal space or for some of the office spaces or dressing room areas. You'll notice that same treatment is covered across the front of the entire campus, all the way across through the public market. There's that L-shape terrace on top of what is currently the dry fountain. That is earmarking that event space. It's creating a space and identifying it as a place where people want to go. And the idea here being, if you're an attendee of an event and you're on the third floor or the second floor patio, but ideally the third floor, you're looking out into the entire downtown program and you're looking at this as, you know, from a bird's eye view, thinking this is a great place for us to have come for the evening. Maybe attendees have come for food and beverage beforehand. They're having an opportunity to sit in a cafe. Maybe they did some shopping. They've been here for a while and they're experiencing this downtown in addition to their arts offerings that evening. This is a different view. This is from the front, looking inward to the program. You'll notice there's some earmarking here for public art as well throughout the project. And this is looking from the corner as if you're looking from what is currently Dallas Drive into that part of the facility. So all in all, we look at it as a great opportunity to reinforce our existing relationship with your cultural unit and even grow on that from the future. And with that, I'll turn things over to Jamie.
Good evening, Chair Nichols, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and give you a little update on how we continue our longstanding partnership with one another. So the city currently owns the 401, 403 Hillcrest buildings, former city hall here, and CRPD has been here for over 20 years. In case you aren't aware of how the rental is currently working here at this facility, what the agreement provides for is we're looking at a 2-year average of our maintenance and operation costs for this facility. And since the CRPD office space encompasses 36% of 403, with, of course, the Black Box and Arts Council encompassing the rest of it, we're charging based on that percentage that you are occupying of office space of this facility. So our 2-year average was $329,000 of our last calculation. Look at that at 36% of that, and that comes up with the $9,900 per month right now you guys are paying for leasing this facility. NPS, on the other hand, which was at 401 for a number of years, was a full market rate tenant. They paid about $50,000 a month, over $500,000 annually for leasing 401 right next door. So again, a very close partnership working with you all and providing a deep discount on the office space lease here versus full market rate. And so framework for the future, Akbar mentioned this is conceptual, but we took that same calculation and looked at what it would be at the existing city hall right now. So we looked at what is our 2-year average operations and maintenance costs of just the city hall portion of the CAP Plaza. There's obviously a lot of theater space, so we wanted to look at just the city hall portion. What is our operating and maintenance costs of just city hall and not including theaters and other tenant spaces? And use that same calculation. So if you had 10,000 square feet of office space in the city hall, what would that calculate at? And if you look at it, 10,000 is about 14.4% of the existing city hall space. And looking at our 2-year average of maintenance and operations costs of about $1 million, 14.4% of that is about $13,000 a month. So currently 9,900, basically 10,000. So a few thousand more a month. But again, this is a conceptual framework. As we move further along in this process, we could certainly get together and see if this is something that works, if maybe a different model works as well. But we just wanted to make sure you are aware, if we look at what we're doing right now, we're not that far off on how much we could lease out the property for. And so just a quick overview on potential funding strategies for this project. Of course, this is the largest project that the city has ever undertaken. Very exciting, but it does cost money. So these are four of maybe the most well-known and the easiest to understand funding avenues for the project. Currently, the city has $40 million that we've already set aside in our reserves that is for the project. So we currently have cash of $40 million that we can already deploy for the project. But obviously that's not enough to fund it. So what are some other potential methods? You have debt financing, so we could obviously issue a bond. We are a very low debt city. The only bond that the city has right now is for its library, and it will be paid off in 2031. So we are a very low debt city right now. Our library is a lease revenue bond, so we could potentially do another sort of lease revenue bond to fund a portion of the project. Another thing you always want to do is just look at all of your surplus land. Is there any land, buildings that the city owns currently that it could potentially sell for surplus property? And so this, with MPS vacating, this was identified as a potential surplus property. So sell of real property, this is being one of the ones that is identified. And I will say, even if we weren't doing downtown project because MPS left, this was a property that would have already been identified anyways of potentially doing surplus for. And then we have public-private partnerships. There is the whole mixed use side of it, and then with adaptive reuse and having other tenants come on, we're looking at what public-private partnerships can we do to help fund part of the project as well. So those are four of just the main, more commonly well-known opportunities that we could use for funding strategies for the project. There are some other ones, forming some districts, a climate resiliency district, parking district, some other strategies that we could use as well. But just wanted to go over where we're at. We're evaluating all of these right now, and we'll be coming to council on the 8th and going over some potential strategies with council as well. And with that, I think we're all open for questions and answers. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jamie, Akbar, and Jonathan for the presentation, especially for the visuals. It's very helpful. I know I've got some questions, but I know I'm going to defer to my colleagues first, and then we'll see what we have to offer. So we'll start to my right, Director Cusworth.
I don't have too many questions, but I have a few comments. And first, I just really I made some notes. So that's what I'm looking at. I really wanted to thank the city for all the support that they've given to CRPD for so many years. Because of your support, CRPD has thrived, and that means that our community has thrived. And I wouldn't want anything to ever happen that would stop our wonderful partnership. And I really appreciated your presentation. It was excellent. So I feel that our partnerships have really prospered our community. So thank you. And I want to say that this is talking for me, that any desire on my part to remain in this facility does not at all reflect my opinion of your project downtown. So that's a whole separate opinion. And one thing that I'm happy for, I'm all about arts and culture. That's a huge part of my life. So I'm very grateful that that will be a focus of your project. So thank you. We already know the city's been very generous with the rent here. So thank you. You've been extremely generous, and we appreciate that. And I also think the city has been very considerate to offer us another location. It hasn't really been, your lease is up in 2 years, you're out of here. So, and it seems like you really thought. One question I did have, and you might have said it, what's the difference in square footage between what we have here and what would be at the city?
Thank you, Director Cusworth. So you have, here you have kind of, we look at it in two parts. You have roughly 11,000 square feet for your administration. And then you have another, I'm going to forget the number, Jim, excuse me.
We say 19?
Yeah, I was going to say 16. Okay. And that's the kind of the Hillcrest Center for the Arts piece, right? The area that Jonathan identified on the second floor of the Civic Arts Plaza, that's just under 10,000 square feet. I think it's about 9,700 square feet.
Okay.
Not quite to the 11,000 that you have here today. One thing that we're doing as a city operation, the private sector is doing this as well, is kind of right sizing their office space based on whatever their modern needs are. The other thing too that I think is important to mention is some of the spaces that you have, for instance, this room, you could leverage other parts of the program to do functions like this. Of course, as part of the design, there's a new city council chambers. That's not a big theater. We're hoping to program that more nights with the introduction of a new council chambers. But of course, that would be available to you for your board meetings. If Jim needs to hold an all-staff meeting, we have facilities that he could hold, large amounts of people in. So I wouldn't look at, yes, you have the 90-something hundred square feet, but then there's other portions of the program that we would, of course, would love to have CRPD use.
So would the 19,000 square feet for the Hillcrest Center of the Arts, do you have a portion that is designated for the Arts Council?
So I'm going to have to ask Jonathan specifically what the Arts Council needs are, but I'll tee it up and then he can kind of finish the rest. There are the black box theater that he showed up on the third floor. That would encompass, in fact, at the Hillcrest Center for the Arts, we modeled that 9,000 some odd square feet based on what you have here. In fact, our designers took that footprint that Jim supplied us with, and we were able to kind of map that onto the third floor of the existing Civic Arts Plaza. As far as the ancillary uses, I think it's going to be a mix of being creative and figuring out where we could program those in the different circulation areas of the building. And then there's going to be a real conversation of trade-offs. Of course, we see tremendous potential with having CRPD on that site. Seeing what you've done with this site makes me excited about what you would do with a site like that. But again, there's probably things that go on here today that may not be, the best use for the downtown, in the year 2032. I'm not fully intimate on all the offerings here, but my guess is there probably are programs that we may need to find other homes for. With regards to the Arts Council, I'm going to have Jonathan come up and if he can share anything on that.
It's an excellent question. Other than the spaces that we've earmarked specifically for CRPD uses, none of the other tenancy has really been solidified. Certainly, Arts Council of the Conejo Valley. Sorry, it's been a long day. The Arts Council of the Conejo Valley we view as an ancillary and support organization to the Hillcrest Center and the CRPD offerings, much like TO Arts is to the Civic Arts Plaza and the Performing Arts Center for us. So, ideally having a discussion to talk about what spaces really would be in need, what the true size of those would be, what spaces and what functionality would need to be. I know they program your art exhibits here on a regular basis. Certainly finding opportunities with visual arts, gallery displays and exhibits, finding areas where we would be able to incorporate them or another organization into doing those programs as well is a part of building out that focus on arts and culture in this particular program. So while I don't necessarily have a specific area that's been identified, on the diagram there was that kind of shell space that was allocated for arts incubation. It's entirely possible that the Arts Council might be located in a part of that part of the facility with some of the other space made available to local artists who are then using it either as a studio space or a workspace, to be able to show and demonstrate in a live environment how they come up with their art and then also be able to show it.
Okay.
Does that adequately answer your question? I know it's not a specific,
Yeah, somewhat.
here's where they're going to be.
Yeah, I understand that you don't have everything exactly planned right now. So you're open to try to make space for what we have here, and you are being very honest that you might not be able to accommodate everything, but there are other spaces that we would be able to access. One thing might not be our huge workshop that we have, but we'll have to, that isn't something to talk about right now. I think that everything that you said is nice. I really appreciated your presentation. I really only have two concerns. One is parking. I go to the Civic Arts Plaza at least once to twice a month, if not more. Like I said, I'm really into the arts. We go to a lot of programs there. And right now, there's not any restaurants much at the lakes. There's just two. And I'm thrilled to have more restaurants because we usually always go out to dinner before we go to a show. And we used to go to all the restaurants at the lakes, but they all went out of business. But my point of that is the lakes parking lot is full on a Friday or Saturday night. Plus the parking structure is full. We usually park in the lakes, but if we park in the parking structure, we have to sit for a long time to wait for all the cars to clear out before we can get out. So I do become concerned if we have a lot more programming going on at that facility, that there's going to be a lack of parking, and that is affecting me personally because I go there a lot and I don't like crowded parking, and I also don't like to pay for parking, and I'm probably not going to ride a bicycle or scooter. So, or take an Uber. So that is a consideration. One thing that is nice about what we have here is that we have a great theater space that is not taking up any parking at that facility. So it seems like a huge loss to me to lose this facility when it's adding so much to the city. And as you said, when you're not having room, you can refer people here. And then we have very good accessible parking here. And my other concern besides parking is that I think that the theater you're adding could go very well from almost all of our adult presentations, but I don't see how it could work for the Young Artists Ensemble. We would probably have to figure out something for that. And I won't tell you all the problems, but I was a mom who had kids in Young Artists for several years, back when it was at Jan's, and there's certain things that could be safety issues. Other than that, I think you're doing a very nice job, and I would like to stay here. And I'm hoping that in the next however many years, you're going to come up with all of those wonderful alternatives to make money and be able to have us stay in this property. But I think you have something to address about parking?
Only if you
Because
wish.
you walked up here as soon as I mentioned
No,
it.
no, only if you wish. I didn't know if it was rhetorical or if you wanted us to share any insights on the parking situation.
If you have information on parking, I'm here to listen, yes.
Well, it's still being figured out, but I'll share with what we do know today. So we have roughly 750 parking spaces in the existing structure. To construct that structure today would cost roughly $40 million. This was an asset our community invested in, obviously 30 years ago. The lake's parking, while of course our showgoers do use it, that too is going away, not by, that's by virtue of the lake's residential project. Of course, the intention is for showgoers to park not in their lot, but of course in the structure. As part of the mixed use buildings that I showed you, one of actually two incorporate podium and subterranean parking underneath them. However, that parking is going to be mostly subscribed by the mixed use and residential on that side of the property. We've done all the traffic modeling, the mass exodus that you experience. I experienced it too several times. A large part of that is due to the fact that we don't really have any attractions before or after a show. You kind of arrive right before showtime. In your case, you might grab dinner and then head to the show, and you kind of get in your car and head home right as it lets out. In a traditional show-going experience, it's kind of a full evening. In fact, TO Arts had a consultant that spoke in front of City Council last summer, and they had this exact observation that right now we can't offer the full evening out. You want to go for the dinner before, you want to go for the nightcap after, the dessert. And what that does, other than keep people there longer, is it spreads out those arrivals and it spreads out those departures. And so that arrival experience just feels different. But in terms of the capacity, we really, when you look at the modeling, we really do not have a capacity issue unless it's a marquee show night. And Jonathan can give you maybe some more data points on when we have hit capacity. It's quite rare. Even with all the different uses we're introducing, it's that marquee show night, kind of the perfect storm where we're tiptoeing towards the limit. And so the question for our parking analysis team is, do you construct very costly parking or do you come up with other strategies to address these peaks in the volume that happen maybe 10 times a year? And so they're looking at the playbook. If you go to Santa Barbara, you go to the Santa Barbara Bowl, or you go to the Amundsen, a smaller theater, they have parking strategies there. They leverage adjacent parking lots and other private property owners to get in on the game and accommodate those cars. They sell parking passes as part of the ticketing experience when you buy your ticket. These are all things that will become part of our playbook one day, but something we haven't really have had to do historically. Jonathan, I don't know if you can add anything not only to the parking, but if there's anything on the programming for children's programming as well.
As Akbar mentioned, that other than some marquee headliner event nights, it's very rare that we completely run out of parking in our facility. It happens at this point in a good year, sometimes about 3 to 4 times a year, which is really in the minority. The majority of time, we still have more than enough space to accommodate all of our needs inside of the parking structure. That, along with the trend that we are seeing, which is an increase in rideshare, where more people are leveraging Lyft and Uber and coming by drop-off and not necessarily driving to the plaza. And I also, as we start to incorporate more offerings for food and beverage before and after, actually think that trend will continue to increase. More and more people who may be inclined to go out for a nightcap after a show, but obviously then not wanting to drive home. So they plan accordingly. They make sure they have their rideshare before, and then afterward, they're able to get home safely as well as an increase potentially in other transportation methods, as was alluded to in the presentation. However, I'd like to also talk about one of your concerns about the youth programming and the young artist ensemble, albeit this may not be the right environment for it. But if I could, I'd love to reach out to you and hear some of those concerns, because I would love to make sure that we're incorporating what some of those concerns would be as we further contemplate usage of this facility. I actually think that the Black Box Theater would be an ideal setting for some of the youth programming. We also have youth programming in the Sheer Form Theater, as well as the Kavli Theater. But ideally, as we were envisioning this black box, to me, I was thinking this would be an ideal location for the Young Artists Ensemble, for the Ventura County Gilbert and Sullivan, for Always on Stage and the Conejo Theater for everybody or everyone, and envisioning that space and how it would be used. So I'd love to hear more about your concerns and to figure out how we might be able to assuage those and figure out potential solutions for what those would be later on.
Great. We can talk. Thank you. Oh, and hey, kudos on that art in public places. Art in public places. Yes, they're all laughing. That's something I'm very positive for.
Thank you. You're certainly hitting some solid points there. Appreciate that. Director Roscoe.
Hey, thank you, Chair. I first and foremost want to say thank you so much for coming today to present. This is probably the third or fourth time I've seen this presentation, and each time it just is more and more exciting to see what's being developed and what's coming to fruition and what are the possibilities for our downtown. I also just want to say thank you so much for the very generous consideration and the opportunity to participate in the downtown plan by incorporating and thinking of a new home for a potential new home for CRPD. I think that no matter what happens, whether we do end up relocating into the downtown project or finding different alternatives, I think at the root of it, we're all just here trying to figure out what's best for the community and what's the best way that we can provide our essential services. And so I don't really have too many questions other than just wanting to provide an opportunity to further explain the timing of things. I know that for those who might be watching at home or referencing this video in the future, they might have concerns about acknowledging that our lease does end in 2 years, and the potential for timelines to eke out. What does that look like in terms of if the CRPD were to join you all at the downtown project? What does that look like?
Thank you, Director Roscoe. What that, so the timeline that I shared earlier, uh, again, we have to get direction from our city council whether this site is part of that funding cornerstone. We'll find that out here soon enough. Assuming it is, if it is part of that funding plan, the city, let's say, for example, transacts with a buyer in the year 2029. And let's also assume that even though your lease ends in 2027, we just continue that on a short-term basis beyond 2027. Any new buyer, whatever project they want to do on this site would require, just like we're doing, a lot of months and years of design, environmental, entitlement. That'll probably take 2 to 3 years is my guess, even if they move at breakneck speed. So if we were to transact in the year 2029, figure they're going to go through that process. Even if they were to take ownership, we could include a leaseback provision such that CRPD would remain in its home until such time the new downtown space was ready for CRPD. Bottom line is there would not be a need for an intermediary home. You would simply go from here to there if that's what you and your board decide.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you. Director Buss.
Thank you so much for your presentation. You did a great job at Rotary last year too. It's always fun to see the new vision. Having been here since 1988, it's fun to see Thousand Oaks might actually have a downtown. So I have a couple questions. Speaking of that, you're going to be building this beautiful downtown there. How are you incentivizing the other properties around you for those owners to potentially get up to speed with maybe, I mean, there's been a few mixed use, but even at the lakes, he has yet to pull permits. So how are we incentivizing the other people around there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, great question. In fact, the chart I showed of the 2 concentric circles speaks to that exact question. I think one strategy the city has already undertaken, and that was the adoption of the general plan. Simply changing those land use designations, incorporating mixed use up and down the boulevard was kind of the starting gun to go ahead and starting to relook at your properties and think about what they could be if you're a property owner along the boulevard. We're already seeing pre-applications come in the door just by virtue of our project being public knowledge. The whole point of the downtown project was to catalyze reinvestment with adjacent property owners. And so we've seen a pre-app come in the door for another mixed-use development. It's not going to happen overnight. I think we all need to acknowledge it's going to take a real estate cycle or 2 to come to fruition. But the zoning and land use is probably first and foremost, and then the public investment into our space is next. What I hope happens is what we've seen in other downtown redevelopments is property values rise, and particularly as these buildings start to age out, a lot of those buildings are along the boulevard are coming up on 50 and 60 years old. They're coming to end of life. I imagine those property owners are going to take a look and see what's possible financially for them.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was curious if you were seeing anyone applying.
We have one pre-app in the door right now, just to the west of City Hall.
Oh, okay, great. And then, yeah, I'm a little curious about how the accessibility is going to work to get on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. If you're going to be adding some parking on the street and maybe even a protected bike lane potentially, are we talking about going down to single lane roads there? And then you're coming off of 6-lane roads into that? That just seems a little congested.
Yeah, good question. So the council will be considering a couple of different lane configuration options for Thousand Oaks Boulevard. I think of course, I want to leave room for the council to opine on this, but my best guess is it's going to maintain 2 lanes of traffic in each direction on the boulevard while still incorporating bike lanes. It will mean trade-offs, keeping in mind that the road segment can grow if people are willing to give up private property, which in this case, on the city side, we may decide, okay, we want angled parking, therefore we're going to allow the asphalt to kind of encroach beyond the property line to allow for angled parking in that segment. But really, I think one of the key themes from the 5 conversations that we had last month and the month before was you got to find a way to incorporate bike lanes somehow, which is something that's absent today. Our engineers are working on a configuration that includes 2 lanes of traffic in each direction with bike lanes incorporated. So I imagine that'll be probably near the top of the list when looking at the configuration options when we present that to council.
Yeah, especially if you're gonna be trying to have electric scooters or anything like that down there.
Sure. Yeah.
I was just thinking about you talking about Ubers, and I don't know if any of you actually live here in Thousand Oaks and have tried to get an Uber anytime between 10 and 2 in the morning, but it takes a while. I mean, we're not a big city, so that's one thing when you say, hey, just take an Uber down there and have a nightcap, it's really difficult to get an Uber to go home sometimes. I mean, literally 15, 30 minutes. So that's one thing that I don't know how the city will encourage us to have more Uber drivers or taxi services. Because
Great question.
that's
So
kind of the issue with saying, hey, just take an Uber down there. It's like, yeah, that's great. But then you're sitting there and your babysitter's calling and you're like, sorry, I'm waiting for my Uber.
right. Part of that is a function. We have very few establishments open past 9 or 9:30 p.m. So part of that is just a function of demand currently, right? And when we get to that point where there are more things, open past a certain hour, I think it's our hope and expectation that there will be those opportunities that will arise based on that demand. But right now, the numbers just aren't there.
Yeah, if we could get Mastro's to just stay open, that would be great. 'Cause then you just leave your car there, but instead they close at 10 o'clock.
Right.
So, okay, great. So then with the lease back that you were talking about, I'm curious if normally when you do lease backs, people want to be incentivized. So we're talking about a lease back, but our rent is extremely low here. So you're expecting someone to purchase this property and then take on 9,900 a month in rent for this space? Or is it going to be the lease back will then be at market rent? How are you going to incentivize a developer for us to sit here?
Yeah, I look at it less as an incentivization as more so as negotiation as part of a sale or any disposition. So, if there are terms that we need to bake into that sale, all it will mean is that the value the city receives for that sale would be diminished by that amount if that's a condition upon sale. So, if we wanted to preserve that $9,900, the eventual buyer, would need to honor that, and that'll affect the selling price, of course. So,
Right.
that is something that we would want to continue as part of a leaseback provision.
Yeah. So, in speaking of that, because obviously the income coming in does help you and help someone who's going to be going through entitlement process and what have you, are you looking to lease out the space that you currently had leased for $50,000 a month?
You're talking about referring to 401?
Yeah, because that would seem like
Right.
you're
Wanna
losing
speak
$600,000 a year, and we're talking about potentially 7 years.
Hi. So unfortunately at 401, there's some significant improvements that need to be made. I don't know if you guys are aware, but the chiller boiler
Yeah, the HVAC.
exploded. So there's not functioning heat at the site. So it would be a significant investment for the city to have that be essentially a well-functioning facility that has centralized air and heat. And so we're not looking at this point to invest money in a property that, would be potentially sold. So we're not looking at anybody to lease in the meantime over there.
So you don't think that what if someone wanted to buy it and keep it as is, though? Then that would increase the value of the property.
I don't think that, yeah, you want to take that one?
The National Park Service, the former tenant there, they moved into a more modern office space. The challenge that we're finding in the market is that is no longer Class A. That is kind of a generous, maybe Class C or B. And so the challenge is we have Class A space in the city today that is going unleased. And there's already fire sales on Class A space. And so it's hard to justify the investment that Jamie was referring to when you're getting, kind of bargain bin prices for Class B office when Class A is going unleased throughout the city today. That's the challenge.
Okay, so you're just gonna, okay, so it'll just be left blank. And then I was curious, when you do decide to lease it, from my very small knowledge of government land being sold or city owned or even our district, you have to offer it to local governments and then to affordable housing, correct? After that, if no government
They
wants to purchase it, is that correct?
Correct. So you're referring to the Surplus Land Act,
Okay.
and that happens simultaneously. It's kind of a blast that goes out to all public agencies and affordable housing developers. The agency has a responsibility to offer to them first at market rate. It doesn't force a sale and it doesn't force a discounted sale. It just says at this market rate, or do other public agencies want to have at it first?
So do you guys have a appraised value for the property?
Yeah, we performed an appraisal last summer on this site amongst many sites, and just to take inventory of all of our real assets, as Jamie was alluding to. I do not have council authority to speak on that, so I just want to be careful that I do not speak out of turn, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I
So you'll be doing a new appraisal though, I'm
We-
assuming when you put it back on, because just in the last 6 months, the market has softened quite a bit.
correct. So
Yeah.
the Surplus Land Act does require a recent appraisal to be conducted that is listed on that notice. So
What's the definition of recent within?
we just did this past summer for the West Side parcel. I want to say within the previous 12 months.
That's pretty long for a definition of recent. That's interesting.
Yeah, that may be, and please don't quote me
Yeah.
on that. I'm going
I was
off of,
expecting 6 months or less. But
yeah.
That's interesting.
Keep in
Yeah,
mind that
okay.
any
I was like,
disposition
oh, that's long.
of this property would not be until 2029 or beyond. So
Right.
the appraisal that we did last year would be
It's
far.
null
yeah,
and void.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And then the only other thing I was thinking about was with the black box, but you kind of answered it. So now people are able to drop off their kids or, just pull up and park. That's not really going to be an option there, is it? So you're not going to be able to drop off your elementary school or middle school
Oh, sorry.
child,
Uh,
right?
Thanks for the question. In fact, Jim and I have had lengthy conversations on this exact topic. I was going to flip to the slide, but I'll just describe it. So there's actually two different drop-off points, and at the corner of, I'm going to go to. If you go to the diagram at the very beginning that shows the bird's eye view diagram of the entire site, and in the meantime, oh, perfect, you have it right here. This is fine. If you go to the next slide. If you go to the diagrammatic one that you were just on. Yeah. Perfect. Just leave it. That one's fine. So at the corner of Dallas Drive and Main Street, that circle that you see at the T intersection is going to get wider. It's going to be a generous carve out. That would allow for a car to be parked along curbside and traffic to still navigate on the inside of that inner circle. So I think the way I described it to your general manager last week was if I was dropping off an 8-year-old, that's where I would drop off the 8-year-old. Say you can go up the stairs and find your way to the Black Box Theater. If I was dropping off a 4-year-old, sorry,
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
it's like I'm not dropping off my 8-year-old or my 4-year-old. I'll tell you that.
no.
Might
And so
be my 12-year-old.
maybe I used the word. Maybe I said 12 to Jim.
Yeah.
So if I was dropping off a younger child, I'd go to the drop off by the Cavly.
Okay.
Or you can park short term and then
Okay, so
walk
there's the
themselves.
two roundabouts that you can go.
Correct.
drop
And
off.
so those would be the two key access points if you're doing a kind of a quick drop off.
Okay, and then my final question is, say we move into this space, who pays for the tenant improvements for our space?
Yeah, so I mean that's something we would need to discuss further, but keep in mind that currently it's office space today.
Right.
So it would be up to the park district to decide at what level do you want to reshape this space. It currently, as Jonathan mentioned, it houses our HR department. It houses Supervisor Gorell's office and the county clerk's office. And so it's existing office space. If you wanted to modernize it, I would assume we'd leave that to your discretion to invest that into the space.
Okay.
But in terms of using it tomorrow, I mean, it's office space today. It's an easy conversion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so
Yep.
much. Appreciate it.
Director Huffer.
Thank you. I do appreciate the presentation that the three of you made this evening. It's been interesting watching the progress of this over a few years. You said you presented this, or somebody from the city presented this last year here. And I know there have been at least two presentations over the last 2 or 3 years. I belong to the local Kiwanis Club, and we've had city folks who have made the presentations there as well. So it's been very interesting to watch the progress and see how this is developing and to see the timeline, which is really helpful. Director Cusworth said that she's all about arts and culture. I'm not. I attend theater occasionally, but I'm more about bricks and mortar and finance and budgeting. And you know, the nice little puzzle that you showed up there, that's city staff and city council issues and things that they have to deal with. And I wish you the best of luck with that. That'll be an interesting project in and of itself. I think it's helpful for our staff to at least have some ballpark figures as to what you'd be talking about if we were to move over to the space that you showed for the park district. You know, it helps out with some of the long range planning for our staff, which is helpful. I guess one of my concerns, it was sort of addressed with Director Buss's question, and I know, I'm sure that for the city, you know, you have certain people who are in the current office space and they're pretty much there all the day or a good portion of the day. They might have to go out someplace and come back, but it's still relatively long term. A lot of the planning that you're talking about, at least strikes me as being fairly long term purposes for being at the facility, whether it's going to the theater, going to a restaurant, going to an office building. Someone's going to get there and stay there for some relatively long period of time. They can drive their car, they can ride their bike, take their Uber, their electric bike, whatever they have. And we're probably a little spoiled up here, but Director Buss was talking about dropping kids off, but we also have a fair number of our constituents who maybe need to come in to get a permit for a picnic area or a play field or something like that. You know, they're going to pop in for 5 or 10 minutes, drop off the paperwork, pick up the paperwork and take off. One of my concerns would be in a site like this, you know, you talked about some temporary drop-off zones, but to just for short-term purposes, it seems to me that this is going to be a little bit awkward. So we're probably spoiled up here, but given the nature of a lot of the work that the Park District does, I can see some issues with that.
Yeah, thank you, Director Huffer. I mean, the city business operation is not all that different from you know, the park district operations throughout the day in terms of the visitors coming for permits, paying water bills, things like that. In the existing parking structure and even in areas throughout the program. But I'll use the existing parking structure because that's really where we want our business, people who are conducting business to come park. There would be short-term parking available to them closer to the entrance, so that way they're not circulating, you know, up 3 or 4 ramps to get to the top. During the day, if you were to visit the structure on Monday through Friday, we have a counter out front as you enter. We have an abundance of parking. As we said earlier, it's really at those marquee show nights that we even come close to coming near capacity. But on any given day, we have about 400 unused parking stalls in that structure. So for daytime visitors who are conducting business, popping in and out, you know, they could find a parking spot rather easily in that existing parking structure.
Okay, I appreciate that feedback. And as I said, that just I know there are a lot of details that would have to be worked out between the city staff and our staff here. But as I said, it's been fascinating to watch this progress over the last several years. So hopefully you'll come back in another 6 months or a year and give us some further updates. So thank you.
Thank you.
Um,
Yes, Director
Chair
Betzler?
Nichols, I have a quick question.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Based on some of Director Buss's comments, what are your plans for this building? This is a historic building. I
For-
mean, who are you planning to buy this and what are you going to be advertising that you want done with these two buildings? They're historic buildings.
Yeah, our team is still evaluating. Again, they're looking at the entire portfolio of our real assets, and so this being one among a few. We're still kind of learning about what any restrictions or covenants might be on there. This site has been zoned for housing since 1997, and it's been updated in part of the general plan process. So I'll have to learn more about any historical references that may lie underneath that.
It just concerned me when you said you didn't want to put in heating to invest in it, but then I thought, what tenants are going to want to come in if there's no heating? So it just was a red flag to me about what you're planning to do with these buildings, because they are historic buildings, so they should be maintained as historic buildings for whatever you decide to use them for. But that is a question I would have, is how are these buildings going to be used in the future? Who are your future tenants? Who are you advertising to? How are you thinking that these buildings will be used? I mean, they were built as city hall at one time. The land was donated. So that would by the Jans family. So I would like to see the integrity of the buildings remain, even though they're going to be reused, just as Timber School, though it's a historic building, the 1924 Timber School, and the developers there are maintaining the buildings. They're being reused, but the buildings are being maintained as historic structures. So I'd just like to put that in, that's something that that should be considered, that this isn't just open land, that there are historic buildings on this site. So that said, I hope that that will be a consideration. And Director Buss kind of adequately put my concern for the Arts Council would be safety of children dropping off and going up 3 stories on their own if they're young children. So we are very spoiled here. We love this place. You know, we are very spoiled here. And so it's really kind of hard to say, wow, thank you. We get to move downtown. It's more of a thanks. Okay, I guess. So, but I really appreciate your presentation and I appreciate all that you're doing for the city. So, thank you.
Thanks.
First, I do want to echo the sentiments that have been shared previously of our gratitude to the city as a partner in very, very many aspects. And I want to share with you, I've shared this with the board and others as well. I'm on the California Association of Recreation and Park Districts with the state, statewide representing all our park districts. And I hear many, many stories of conflicts between districts, park districts and cities, park districts and counties, and, just horror stories where they're trying to take over park districts even in some instances. And when I share the relationship that we've had here and continue to have, jaws drop. They're just astounded at the number of times I can explain the shared facilities, the agreements, the working relationship that we have. Everyone's just astounded when they hear that, and they can't believe that it's true. So again, thank you for being a part of that and for continuing that effort. I mean, this just the effort to squeeze us in here is testament to that. So thank you, and please, pass that along to the general manager, city manager, and the city council members as well. Just as an aside, back in the 1990s, I participated in the Committee of 107, which was put together to determine what would happen to the jungle land property, which led to the Civic Arts Plaza. So I've been familiar with that site for many, many years and what was proposed. You were probably all not even born back then or close to it, but it was a large part of our history back then. I want to also mention one other thing that has nothing to do with the city of Thousand Oaks, but my concern is that it might at some point. Back in 2006, I was working with the city of Glendale, and a team from an organization called Caruso Affiliated approached the city in 2006 under a redevelopment program to redo downtown Glendale. Became known as the Americana at Brand. And to your point, it transformed downtown Glendale. And I don't know if any of you were there before and after that took place, but has been and continues to be a transforming downtown. A lot of multifamily residential in through there, a lot of new venues. It literally just changed it from a sleepy old downtown, traditional Southern California downtown, to something that's, much different than that. So I could see where this type of an effort could expand that, just as you pointed out. People are already throwing applications on the table. What do you think? Here's some ideas. So I can continue to see that expanding. Just that's the way capitalism and our economy works. So I can see that happening. So that's part of the reason why I say some of the things and we're asking some of the questions, and part of it even centers around children's safety. We come up here, maybe once or twice a week, and there are programs happening here daily. And often when I'm leaving here after a board meeting, there's a group of, half a dozen kids up there on the bench of the street, just chit chatting, waiting for mom and dad or somebody to come pick them up. Not a care in the world. And the parents really don't even care because we're isolated. We're to ourselves. They know that somebody's up there paying attention to them. And I don't think they're going to have that same feeling downtown, unfortunately, especially a hustling, bustling downtown if it were to grow and expand like I would expect it to do. And just the business that happens around the city hall, as well as the theaters that are taking place there too. So the intent is to make it a hub of downtown. And when that happens, parents are going to have more concerns about just dropping off their kids. Here they can pull up, drop them off, watch them go into the front door, down the hall, and they take off and then they pick them up. So it's a very safe and secure environment, and we're isolated. We don't have neighbors, so it's very secure. So that, I think, drives a lot of our concern with just some of the activities that take place up here. And while you gratefully have provided accommodations for the administrative offices and the Black Box Theater, and I believe, Akbar, you mentioned there might be trade-offs as far as some of the programming that happens here that wouldn't be happening there. The Hillcrest Center for the Arts, while we have that name there for a reason, is really, in essence, another one of our community centers. I mean, this room here is filled with campers during the summer building Legos, or it's a science camp, even during the winter break. There's a room down there that's used for yoga and dancing. And so there's lots of programming that happens here regularly that we would have to find alternate locations for. Because this is, like I said, it's in essence a community center to itself. I mean, we got 11,000 square feet over there and we use it all. It's a constant activity. So that would be a little bit of a challenge for us to start finding locations for that. Again, I too have the concerns about parents dropping off kids, but also just with the 150 guests at a Black Box Theater. They're used to coming here, and it's going to be a whole different scenario. So there'll be ripple effects to the community, and I also fear that there will be ripple effects to our programming and perhaps a reduction in participation just because where that location is. They just don't want to have the hassle of going downtown. Granted, we're spoiled up here, and I'll admit that. And even the rental agreement that you're offering, I mean, that's like, gosh, make it twice as much. It's still a deal. It's a bargain. So want to recognize that absolutely. Again, it's again testament to our ongoing partnership. Just a generic question here. I don't know if the programming of this site with CRPD is an assumption that the park district would want to be there, or was there some interaction at some point where they said, "Do you want to be there?" And so we know how to plan that. Can you tell me if that question was ever asked, or if there was an assumption, or how did this kind of come to be?
Great question, Chair Nichols. Well, a year ago when I was here last, I think one of the members of your board asked me a similar question, and I think I said a year ago, well, that's, at the end of the day, this is really a business decision for the park district. But in lockstep with that, your general manager and I have had frequent conversations over the past 12 months of this being a possibility. Of course, not a certainty, but as long as it's a possibility, and of course, our team, our entire executive team and our city manager see tremendous value in having the park district over there. We want to make sure we earmark a space so that's kind of held for the park district to be at least they have a home there if they decide they want to have a home there. So there hasn't been any official action by the city council, certainly not by your board. It's really just been making sure that we're preserving optionality for you and your board, and seeing where the conversation goes from there.
Okay, and that's much appreciated. I don't want to disregard that. I certainly appreciate that. And I can understand the value, certainly like with the black box theater there, integrating that within the overall thing, especially if you get some young kids there and they're just, kind of exploring this as an option. And then they see that great big old theater over there and say, oh my gosh, I'd like to be a part of that. Yeah, I mean, I can see that integration and that whole progression. It's kind of like, having an elementary school next to a junior high school next to a high school, and you can kind of see how that all works and kind of get the kids' feelings and built up for that. And I've even talked to the general manager about, what would be the affiliation between our administrative staff and the city hall staff. And I know there is some interaction, perhaps not all the time, but I know Jim participates in the executive team, which is a great asset. So I can see some benefits there. It's not maybe essential, but it would be beneficial. So I can certainly see that. I know it was mentioned with this particular site, having a rich history, I guess dating back to the Jans family in the 1970s, being the, eyebrow on the hill when it was built, very unique architecture. And then I know in the 1990s, as was mentioned, specific Plan 17 was approved, which, as you mentioned, it authorized residential as much as many other uses in through here. But there are 3 planning units as part of that specific plan. And, planning unit 3 is designated as basically, natural open space. And then there's planning units 1 and 2, which has, various uses that were identified that were okay. And then I also noticed that there are, I guess, 8 separate parcels which comprise the property. In an effort to try and preserve this facility, would it be possible to set aside maybe those parcels upon which these facilities are located, separate that out from so that maybe the park district could use that and still be able to allow developers access and use of the other parcels and still being consistent with a specific plan? Is that something that has been or maybe could be considered?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the question fully, and if I can ask our tech person over to the right here, if you can go to the Q&A slide and advance it just one more slide past that. And I think I have a map of our site here. There we go. This is the most recently adopted general plan map from 2023. The big swath as you correctly stated, specific plan 17, the big swath in green is of course Fireworks Hill. That is forever preserved open space. I want to make that abundantly clear to anyone listening. Forever preserved open space. As part of that open space, we would want to make sure that trail access is preserved as part of any redevelopment of this site. What that looks like can take on many different forms, but suffice it to say that we'd want to not only preserve it, but enhance it as part of any redevelopment. And of course, we would love to engage with the Park District staff when that day comes of what that looks like. I don't know if I got to the second half of your question, and if there's any part that was left unaddressed, please reiterate.
Well, let me just incorporate that to what I was going to mention next. Because of the significance of this facility, like I said, historical and otherwise, and because it functions well for our uses, just was, I don't expect an answer,
Okay.
but I'm going to pose a question. Would the city entertain Park District ownership of this facility to help preserve its integrity as a historical facility, also retain it as a public asset for the community. And then, perhaps even incorporating the open space where the park district could be the caretaker of that in perpetuity, where we could, again, keep up with the use of the site for administrative purposes, in essence, like I said, the use of it as a community center and the cultural purposes. And I think we could probably even use 401 for our expanding uses, especially considering the anticipated growth of the community on Teal Boulevard, the Jans Mall, the Oaks Mall, where we're going to add residential properties. And, it seems like this would be a convenient location to have a park facility, and would serve those communities. So you just want to, and like I said, I don't expect that you have the answer, but I'm just planting that seed, would it be an option?
No, I appreciate the candor and acknowledging that clearly that's a policy decision for our city council, and I think the board is well aware of that. So as we get further into the funding opportunities or funding options for the city council and making the downtown a reality, of course, that'll be maybe one of the avenues they can at least be aware of.
Mhm. With that, okay, Director Cusworth, go ahead.
So with Director or Chair Nichols' comments, I have a couple of comments. As you see, we have a hill here that is, native growth. I guess we'll call it that. It's not designated open space, but it's native growth. There's a lot of oak trees there. If you were going to sell this property for development, would that area be preserved? And if it is preserved, could it be an area that the parks could use to have somewhat of a green space for all of the people that are going to be moving across the street with those apartments? Or would the city be considering that area to be a space for development?
It's a good question, Director Cusworth. I just frankly, I don't know that at this juncture. I'm not sure exactly what the metes and bounds of a disposition would look like, nor do I know or have council authority yet on whether this would be that site. So I think we'll know answers to those questions as we get later into the summer, but I think it'd be a little premature for me to comment on that kind of question right now.
Yes, Director Buss, go ahead.
So I have a question on the map that you prepared and brought. Thank you. So are the red parcels the ones that would be sold? So the green is,
The green is
Right?
the open space. Yeah, the green
Okay.
is your open space designation. And I don't have a legend on this. I apologize.
but the other ones?
Yeah, the ones in red, or the kind of the light red color, those are part of the developed areas. And then obviously the little blue that you see where it says PL, that's public use. That's the fire station.
Oh, okay.
So just to orient you on the map here. Yeah, so if there was a disposition, those are the parcel lines as they exist today.
So where does this building on that map?
That building, I believe, is in 0 or just below. I believe 0 is your
In
where
zero?
it says 401 on the map, I think is where the buildings sit.
Oh, this hill is a lot bigger than I thought it was. Yeah, I just think it will be an interesting conversation for the city because we just recently, as I'm sure you guys know, had an appeal on our community center that we were trying to build because that neighborhood did not want us to expand. So I think that, we obviously, if we don't have this space, really, since the programming won't all fit downtown, really need to build there. And their big concern was a lot more people coming to that area because it is set back into a residential neighborhood. And when they realize that 3,000 units are coming online right here and those people, that's their community center, I don't see how they're going to be really happy about this opportunity being missed for the community. So also just being someone who lives literally right there on Lynn Road in Lynn Ranch, I can tell you that these intersections here and with the 3,000 units that comes on, when I try to go at 2:30 to get on the freeway, it's backed up in those intersections all the way till 8 o'clock at night. So it's just, I think that it's when you live right here and seeing how impactful this will be, having 60 acres of open space with these buildings and just the low traffic footprint that these do, it will be difficult, I think, for the community around to realize that the city could have kept this. That's just my comments for being someone who lives right here in the community.
Thank you. Before I let you go, I understand we have one resident online.
And the whisper I just had from Aline is they
Oh.
don't need to talk now.
Oh.
Is that right? Or I guess we could still ask if they had.
Yes, he said the chair asked all of his questions, so thank you to the chair.
It must be,
It was Nelson Bus, by the way, in case
Yeah.
Nelson listening.
okay. Okay, so with that, any final questions before I let our guests go? And thank you so much. I know this is quite laborious. I know you folks have really been through the ringer, probably from both sides, from residents and staff as well. So thank you for carrying this load and for sharing it with us. Again, appreciate the partnership that we have enjoyed and look forward to continue that process. And how this unfolds, I know we'll continue that relationship. So thank you for sharing this evening.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Okay, let me clean up my notes here and get to the next item. Okay, that'll bring us to new items. If the Board of the Clerk would please get item
Absolutely.
A for us, please.
We are at 9A, which is public hearing, preliminary operating budget fiscal year 2025-26, and adopt resolution 032025-A.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to defer to our Administrative Director, Director of Administration, Melissa Smith.
Thank you, Chair and Directors. Good evening. Tonight, we're here to open a public hearing and present the preliminary budget for the upcoming fiscal year as part of our two-year budget process. So as a reminder on the two-year budget cycle, this approach gives us an opportunity to take a deep dive into our past budgets and actual numbers every 2 years to identify the trends and assess how we've been performing every 2 years. This year in the cycle, we meet with the unit supervisors to understand their needs for the next 2 years. We're required to adopt a preliminary budget by June 30 and a final budget by August 31st. Historically, we aim to adopt the preliminary budget around March or April and the final budget in June. But this preliminary budget is essentially a baseline budget. It mirrors the current year budget. And it acts kind of as a safety net so that if we don't, for whatever reason, get a final budget by July 1, this preliminary budget is used to give us the spending authority to continue basic operations until we have that final budget done. So from now through June, we'll be holding public hearings on the budget at every board meeting in order to gather input from you, from public participants, whoever wants to come those nights. And then we'll continue refining the budget through that input. Both our capital and operating budgets will be brought to the board for review in May and June before we come with a final budget request at the end of June. This process allows us to maintain the transparency of the budget process, but it also allows us to adjust for unforeseen circumstances. So for example, in 2020, with COVID, we had to make some significant changes to our budget. And so by adopting the preliminary budget first, we were still able to function even though we had a bit of a delay in our final budget until I think it was mid-July that year that we finally adopted it. Additionally, our two-year budget cycle is aligned with our two-year MOU with the union. We're currently working on setting up dates to start those negotiations, and we're hoping to incorporate any necessary changes with that MOU into that final budget that we'll give to June. So with that, I'm available for questions, and we can ask if there's any public for the public hearing portion too.
Just for clarification, what we're doing tonight is we're adopting a preliminary budget by resolution, and we're setting public hearings that start on April 3rd. So tonight is not actually a public hearing. Is that correct?
I think we advertised this as a public hearing, so it is technically a public hearing today
Okay.
as well.
I
And
did
in the agenda, I think we labeled it public hearing.
I don't see anything that says it's a public hearing.
New items, a public hearing, preliminary operating
Okay,
budget.
because everything in the, yeah, because everything I read here just didn't say anything about it being a public hearing.
Oh
So
yeah, we didn't
that's-
reference it in the materials. The agenda just said it. You're
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Okay, so I need to open a public hearing.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
The public hearing is open. And I see no comments from the public. So I'm closing the public hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the board? Yes, Director Huffer.
Just to confirm, Melissa, the numbers that you presented to us.
Oh. Okay.
Is on this item here?
Budget.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right. Go ahead, Director Huffer.
The end.
Sorry. Just to confirm, the numbers that you are providing for us this evening are the same numbers that we approved for year two on the current budget. So
Correct.
as we go through this process, we'll be examining each portion of this preliminary budget in more detail.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? There's no questions or comments. Be open to a motion regarding approving the resolution. Yes, Director Huffer.
Thank you, Chair Nichols. I'd like to move approval of resolution number 032-025-A to be read in title only, all future readings to be waived.
Thank you. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. That passes, and we'll look forward to our ongoing public hearings.
I believe we need to have the resolution.
Oh, that's right. So I was thinking just public hearing. Yes, resolution. If you could read the title only, please.
Resolution number 032-025-A, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Conejo Recreation and Park District adopting the fiscal year 2025 to 2026 preliminary budget for the district.
Thank you. Okay. And could you introduce item 9B for us, please?
Item 9B, 2024 to 2028 5-year strategic plan and annual goals and objectives.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to defer to our general manager, Mr. Friedel.
Yes, thanks, Chair Nichols and members of the board. This item begins on page 69 of your packet. And there are two recommendations. It's approve the updates to the 5-year strategic plan and consider and provide direction on our goals. So the backup materials for that on page 73 are again, we had these 2 meetings ago, right before the field trip, we went over our goals and strategic plan. The goals are the most recent 4th quarter update. What I provided beginning on page 70 as part of the actual staff report are those goals slightly modified to reflect the ones that have been completed and have just been removed, and then a couple modifications to some of the goals, particularly D, J, and O, as well as the addition of potential new goals below those. And there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. So with that, removing 3, adding 5, we're still in the ballpark. Honestly, more than we could possibly do in 1 year, but it is nice to actually be working on multiple projects, because some, for whatever reasons, sometimes in our control, sometimes and oftentimes outside our control, things, you come to a bit of a wall or a lag or something, and you can kind of pivot and keep pushing some other priority forward. Looking at the strategic plan at our last meeting, there was just, a few very specific and directed suggested modifications to that, tweaks, if you will. And it is a 5-year plan, and those are all listed in detail in the staff report on page 69 and 70. And it's namely on page 3. We won't reprint this whole thing probably in mass, but we will probably change it online. So on page 3, we will change the governing board of directors to include the newly elected directors, so that we get the group correct. On section 2.9, which is in the strategic plan, minor modification to be clear that we're looking for a long-term location for both CRPD administrative offices as well as the Hillcrest Center for the Arts. On section 3.1.4, there was a comment about recognizing that we have, point in time snapshot, we have fully funded some long-term liabilities. So we were going to take the word unfunded out, just simply delete that word in 3.1.4. So it would be continue to actively manage the district's long-term liabilities. So we're taking that adjective out. Section 5.9 would be amended to read in disaster preparedness, we'd amend it to include public safety power shutoffs as part of the things that we are preparing for and thinking about as we do our normal disaster preparedness. And then finally on section 8.8, in there, we were going to acknowledge that wildfire planning efforts community-wide and working with specifically other agencies and communities is an important part of dealing with sort of our commitment to looking at fire safety and solutions to, wildfire protection and planning. So those are the only 4 changes in the strategic plan. So we have 2 separate motions, one to specifically approve the updates to the strategic plan. And then when it comes to the goals, I'm kind of leaving it a bit open for you guys. The actual written recommendation says, consider and provide direction on our goals and objectives. So if you have any other additional goals, modifications to these goals, I don't really have them prioritized. I mean, that's a thing that can be done. I'm not, I'm not suggesting that we need to prioritize them per se, but there's nothing wrong with doing that either. So I'm kind of leaving the list of goals to you guys and, give us a sense if you say do all the old ones plus add 5 more. I think that's something we can, certainly work toward and work on and work to make happen. So leave it to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just start with my left over here, Director Huffer. If you have any comments or recommendations that you'd like to share with the board?
Well, as far as the updating the strategic plan, you said they're relatively minor, but certainly useful to make those changes. So I would have no problem with those. You added 5 potential new goals, and I guess these must have been discussed along the way, but a couple of them I would certainly agree with. Additional parkland, certainly very important. Working with partners to identify and promote accessible trails, and definitely phase 1 of Conejo Community Park, assuming we can find some funding for that. Those 3 I would certainly agree with. I am less enthusiastic about possible location for a spray ground. Maybe it's because my grandkids live out of town and they wouldn't use it. So, I can see the possible need for, not the possible need, I can certainly see the need for informational signs, rules and so on. I'm not sure whether that's really rises to the level of an additional goal for our coming year. So those would be my comments.
Thank you. Comments taken. Director Buss.
I'm glad that you just made me realize what spray ground was, because I was like, what is a spray ground? You mean a splash pad? Is that like the Latin term is spray ground?
It's Jim's words. I had the same question.
Oh, I was like, where is this?
I said,
I
spray
literally-
ground. You mean a splash pad? And he said, yes.
I've never heard, maybe that was your kids' age. They called it a spray ground.
It's an old man term, I think, maybe.
I was thinking, I'm like, is this a sprinkler location? That's what I was thinking. I'm like, oh, yes. And then I thought that, I'm like, maybe we're looking for somewhere to try new pesticides. So, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Yes, it's a splash pad.
A splash pad. Okay, got it.
Back in the day, we called them the spray grounds.
Yeah, that was really back in the day. Yeah, no, I think I kind of agree that, yeah, to updating the park rules informational signs. I don't know if that's like a huge goal, but that or is that just something, I guess you put it on here because you want it done. But other than that, no, I think the rest of them all seem to make sense for me for the 5 new goals. And yes, I think this is a lot of stuff to try and accomplish in 1, 2, or 5 years, 10 years even. You know, one comment I was gonna say though is with the beginning phase construction of Conejo Park Improvement Project, phase 1 is the bathrooms and all of that, right? Okay. Cause I was gonna say, you know, maybe we are not gonna be expanding that facility, maybe, just saying. So, but that makes sense if it's just the bathrooms and all that. Great, yeah, I agree with these. That's it.
Thank you. Director Roscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree. I really like the potential new goals. I think I'm the one that advocated for updates to our park rules and information signs to include Spanish language. And so I was really glad to see that made the potential list. And I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Director Cuthbert.
So, has something happened that we're going to now think of the splash pad? Because that was sort of off the books for a while. I mean, I do have grandchildren who live in the area, so, that is nice on a hot day to have. But I guess we're just opening a conversation because maybe it was before we were always in heavy drought time but we'll open the conversation. Maybe Director Bus mentioned it also, so thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I really feel like it's a needed goal when I look at these. Like, I feel like there's a lot more important things on here than the splash pad, even though I would like a splash pad, but my kids are 10 and 13 now. It's a little awkward. They probably won't go with me.
But you're gonna be there.
And then I'll be there by myself, and that's really awkward.
No, but it is something, I think it is something for us to think about because a lot of cities do have splash pads. And so it is something to at least think about.
Well, and it's a good point because if the Jan's Mall does sell, because that is our splash pad, that will probably be gone. Because I believe that might area could possibly be where the new hotel or something is going, right? So who knows if they're even gonna keep
Yeah,
that.
if they'll take
And that's
that
kind
out.
of what we've used in Thousand Oaks.
Yeah, no, that is our splash pad.
Yeah.
and it is
so
used.
I guess, yeah, no, we might want to keep it on there, see if the
Yeah,
Jan's Mall.
it's something to think about.
Yeah.
And I think everything else here is fabulous. I like the idea of promoting the accessible trails if we have some. I'm sure that there's some that we could easily modify or just designate. I mean, I'm sure we have some trails already there that could be accessible. We just have to take a look at them and see if they would work. So, okay, thank you. I can't think of anything else right now. I tried to think about it all weekend, but I haven't come up with it. But I guess that this could be an ongoing goals, right? Or next year's goals, or put in goals as we think of them.
So in the
Thank you.
blanks,
Thank you
yeah.
very much. That was very thoughtful.
So just to jump in regarding the signage and the spray park, spray ground. I botched it. I'm sorry. Should trademark that. That's something, additional aquatic uses, which a splash pad would be incorporated in. That would be something that, I've received comments from the public over the years, as well as I've been working with, Rochelle's staff through our CIP and my staff. And so that's something that the board may see through our 10-year capital improvement plan. That might be something that we would be looking to add. It would probably be on year X, just from a funding standpoint. But then also whether they're actual annual goals, I would probably recommend to remove that spray ground from there, and we can see that in a month or two when we bring that back to the board. And then from the signage standpoint, that's something that we can review. That's going to coincide with our ordinance update that the board approved in September. And so that's something that we would be kind of taking a look at. And that would be whether it's all at once, that would be a capital expense. But then if we can incorporate it just into our routine operations of the new format and implement that in time throughout the park system, because we would have hundreds and hundreds of signs to replace all at once. So just staff suggestion on possibly omitting those two items from our annual goal. So.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Uh, as far as the two different recommendations, yeah, definitely appreciate the updates proposed for the strategic plan. I think those are all appropriate. And regarding the 2025 goals and objectives, I was thinking, the same thing as Director Mooney was saying, this is for 2025, and I think, wow, we're adding more to what we can do in 1 year. But maybe it's a direction to staff is saying, okay, here are some potential new goals. Give us a recommended time frame. Like you say, was this within 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, year X, whatever it happens to be? I think that would be helpful for those potential new goals. I do believe, like the first one, work to secure additional parkland. I think that goes hand in hand with the development pressures that we're underneath, and that will just it's kind of almost the natural process that we go through. I did have a few comments or questions about the strategic goals as they're listed on item C, as far as updating the master plan to be consistent with the city's general plan. Would it be appropriate to add the city's revised general plan? So it's not just like a plain statement, but it's kind of like an action because of the park district action based on the city's action that we need to kind of keep up with them.
Yeah,
based on that revised.
You can add the word revised or
And
updated with
and I don't know
the
if
updated general plan.
Do they have a name to that? Is it the 2045 general plan, or I don't know what that was their goal, but I don't know. But anyhow, just to make that clarification. And then on item D, it says address Quimby fees. It sounds kind of vague. I don't really know what address means, but I was thinking, could we be more specific? Whether assess the Quimby fees or update the Quimby fees or study the Quimby fees, something a little more proactive rather than just address, because it doesn't really mean much. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but
Yeah, I mean,
I think it just means.
we're not
think about-
entirely captains of our own ship on that. And so the effort is to get our partners to maybe understand our situation and whether they could be adjusted in a way that provides a little more revenue for us. That is a tricky right now because of the kind of the nature of development and the economy and the kind of sentiment on building and whatnot. So we're kind of in an interesting time in that regard. So it could be an effort that we can justify, I'll flat out say it, we can justify a much higher fee than we're collecting legally, technically, but can we politically, and given all the variables in terms of the cost of housing, the way the state legislature is constantly eroding, and tightening impact fees and even public sentiment on affordability of housing and whatnot. And this is an extra cost on housing. So right now, I would characterize our fees as in a fair amount. Like, we are treating current developers fairly. We know we're under collecting. Our $12,800 a unit fee is probably under collecting by about $2,000 from what we can easily justify if we were to update our Nexus study on that. So I would argue there's a bit of a discount there, but I'm not sure that the discount is a bad thing in this environment, if you will. So it's a tricky spot we're in.
no, and I agree and understand with all that you're saying, and I'll be having more to say about Quimby fees later. But I guess just the word address doesn't really
Right.
say much.
Director
Director
Nichols,
Cussworth,
I love the word address. I think it's a great word. And I think it's basically just saying, we're keeping this on the forefront. We're thinking about it. Because we don't really have too much power over it right now. And so, I mean, if we want to go through a whole you know, thesauruses of thinking of a better word, but I am voting for address. If we can keep that word there.
I'm not going to make a big deal about it. Yes,
Okay,
Director
thank
Bus?
you.
Well, I was gonna say, I think that I agree with Jim that this is not gonna be the time probably for a while to try and push this. So it's like keeping an address makes it like it's there, but we're not really being very proactive on it because I feel like already we're seeing rising costs in construction. So
Yeah.
I
yeah.
feel like we're not gonna have a lot of people building as much as everyone would hope.
Well, would it be appropriate to eliminate the first sentence and just keep what's in bold? Just as a
Yeah.
statement.
That's fine.
Yeah, I feel like we don't need to spend a lot of like time trying to really address this
Yeah, I just
at this time.
Yeah, I think I can delete
I think we
everything.
got a
but the
couple
bold is
years.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Protect and
yeah,
promote.
it's just
Yeah,
that's the way. It's more of a philosophy than it is an action.
right.
Yeah, that's what I feel like too. I feel
That's
like
fine. Like if you
Okay.
take out, yeah, yes, protect
Okay.
and promote.
All right.
Or more active than, yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
And item F, Orchard Skate Park construction. Was there any action associated with that? Is it like monitor,
You want
initiate?
that next week?
Oh, so it should be ... Okay, gotcha. All right.
No, that is actually on your,
Okay.
that 2 weeks from now, you should have that in front of you. to
All right, thank
actually
you. Thank you.
Award the contract.
Item I says keep the revenue measure simmering on the back burner. I know exactly what that means. But
That's a step below address. It's, it's a,
no, I was just gonna say to you, you just, rather than say revenue measure, just broaden that, just say, hey, you know,
revenue.
look, consider alternate revenue.
Explore.
Yeah, explore revenue options is not necessarily revenue measure, but just,
Well, that is something.
Revenue
that
options.
we're actually exploring. We have a committee for that actually. And we do, meet and talk about whether we're gonna bring it to a boil or we're gonna keep it simmering.
okay, then I'll leave that cooking option to the committee. Okay, and then I kind of concur with some of the potential new goals. I just, kind of question why do we need to add any more to the list? But that said, I do think the securing additional parkland should be, again, just like as a reminder to include that. And phase one construction, and all the rest, I'll defer to staff if they feel that should be goals, but I mean, it seems like we've got quite a boatload there. But regarding the informational signs and Spanish language signs, I was looking at the reference points in the strategic element at 7.3, and it starts off with engage the community and then goes on from there. So what I would suggest is, why don't we either do a survey or a study or whatever, engage the community to find out what additional signage is needed, what languages are needed, where would be the preferences, either locations or types or whatever, rather than just starting to replicate all the things that we have in the different languages. Well, let's get a pulse of what the community would like to have. See what's out there, what do they see as a need, something that we could, that way we get it done right. So that would be my suggestion. But again, not that has to be a goal for 2025, but, as we try to address, what would be appropriate for that. That would be my suggestion. Those are all my comments. So anything else from the board? And if not, we do have 2 recommendations here, so I'll entertain a motion for both of those recommendations. It says Director Huffer.
Since everybody's jumping at it, I would like, like to move that we approve the updates to the 5-year strategic plan and that we incorporate the comments and direction that the board has made on district's 2025 goals and objectives.
Thank you. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion to second. All those in favor say aye.
I
Any opposed? All right, thank you. That carries forward. All right. That takes us to item 10, reports and announcements. We have a number of items included in our packet. Was there any questions or comments from the board on any of those items that we have? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward to item 11, department reports, and we'll start with the Parks Division report. Director Mooney.
Thank you, Chair Nichols, members of the board. Just a quick update. We've had some staffing changes directly in parks and planning at administration. So Matt Kuba retired today. Today was his last day. Patrick Belovic will be the new park superintendent. And also HR is finalizing kind of final paperwork with our new planner. It's looking by mid-April, we'll have a new planner on the team as well. So, but with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. All right, next is the Recreation Division report. Director Callis.
Thank you, Chair Nichols. I had a whole bunch of stuff, but I was told I might be kicked. No, I'm teasing. I'll just stick along with Andrew's report out. Brian Negedy is our new coordinator at Conejo Community Center. He started last Monday, I believe. And we have a new coordinator starting at the Thousand Oaks Community Center on May 31st. So that is where we are. And then we will be fully staffed.
Any questions?
And available.
I do have one question, and I mentioned this to you earlier, but just to state it out loud. When I was reviewing the warrants today, I was just kind of refreshing my mind that we do have a lot of instructors, contractors, independents that we use for various programming. And I just was curious as how those are evaluated. Is this like on a routine basis, each session, and is it at staff at the facilities? Is it, do you get input from parents or participants? How does that work?
Independent contractors are supervised by the units that hire them. And so they have communication with the parents. We also do surveys for every session, and parents have the opportunity to give us feedback on independent contractors and our staff also. So we get it in multiple different ways. And then our supervisors and coordinators work with our independent contractors if there are concerns or complaints, just to address those. And then ultimately, if there is someone that we are not happy with the business or the service that we're receiving, when the contract ends, we have the ability to not hire them again. So
Okay. Thank you.
with that, I
Yes.
probably should address the Borchard parking situation. Just so you guys know, for years, we have worked with other entities in the community and the school district to kind of offer additional parking for the students. And over the last maybe year to year and a half, we've seen an increase in negative behavior amongst the students. Donuts, peeling out, fights in the parking lot that I've actually stopped. So kids videotaping other kids doing these negative behaviors. So unfortunately, the other day, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back is we had 3 cars in the parking lot doing donuts. We just had our staff, no other people really helping us out. And we had a participant with a young child almost get hit. And so our staff did work with the school district, did communicate with the school district on our desires to, we need to stop this right now. There's too many things happening before something really bad happens. The school district did support us on that decision. And so that's why we kind of put the brakes on for right now. It doesn't mean that in the future, there might be some opportunities to redesign what we're doing or have additional discussions. But for right now, we're really just trying to watch the safety of the people that are using our facility, coming in and out of preschool programs and sports organizations during that specific time of school gets out until the end of the day. So that's where we are right now. Just FYI.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, next we have our Management Services Division report. Director Smith.
Thank you, Chair and Directors. I will keep it brief because you get to hear from me at our closed session, which I'm going to run off and set up after I speak. But I did want to say that Michelle Brower, our senior accounting technician, tomorrow is her last day. She's retiring. I wanted to thank her for her service. She's been with the district for over 15 years. And I think today we found out she did just shy of 100,000 payrolls.
Oh my God.
So
1,000.
1,000.
Oh.
Anyway, not 100,000. There was $100 million, 1,000 payrolls.
Wow.
So just thank you, Michelle. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Yes, Director Huffer.
Not so much a question as a request. I know you can't update this on a daily or weekly basis, but with all these new people coming on board and people leaving, plus the fact that if you look at the board of directors pictures on this document, would it be possible to update this?
We actually have some org charts with pictures on them that just became available recently, and those are all going to be sent out to you next week.
Oh.
It's an evolving and changing situation, of course. Like Matt's on there right now, and he'll be off next week. But we were just talking this morning about getting that out to the board of directors, and it's something that Andrew's assistant Jody Dixon worked very hard on. So you'll be able to look at that next week. We'll send it out. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up.
That's what I call.
I also wanted to
instant
mention.
service. so-
Yes. Matt Kuba's retirement party is tomorrow evening at, what's the name of the
Tarantula Hill.
Tarantula?
Is there anywhere else?
At what time?
It's from 4 to 6, and we hope you all can join us. I don't see that I put it on your calendar. I hope you got the flyer quite a while ago, but it's sure to be a lot of fun because it's all about Matt, so.
No. You mean the one that you were going on a hike?
Right. All right, thank you. Next is our general manager's report, Mr. Friedel.
So between all the staff, I have really nothing new to add. And the thing I might have said, I'm pretty sure you're going to talk about it, Chair Nichols, legislative stuff. So I'm going to just be quiet. Available for questions.
You can join in. Thank you. Okay, director's reports and follow-up reports. I'm going to go back to my right, Director Cusworth.
So I was just recently at Senior Concerns with a lot of you. And then I've been kind of doing just a lot of things with VCSDA as my new sort of elected job to be the president with it's really not just me, it's our whole district kind of is the president's office. But one thing that I really enjoyed, I've gone and talked to a few of the districts, our special districts, and I've really enjoyed talking to them. And then I had a wonderful conversation with Elena Brokoff. She's the director of the Ventura County Museums, and she came to the Stagecoach Inn Museum, and I showed her around and talked about how we could collaborate. And she's going to be talking on our next VCSDA meeting. That's on April 1st. It'll be at the Camarillo Senior Center. So I hope you'll all mark your calendars and come out to that. Raquel's doing a really good job of sending stuff out for that. And then this doesn't have anything to do with really CRPD, but I've been starting to go to the tourism board meetings, and I took them some brochures for the museums, and I think I'll take them some trail maps and just kind of trying to talk to the hotels to say, hey, promote the stuff that we've got here. So if any of you have any other ideas of what I could, it's mainly hotel people that are at the tourism board, to just say, hey, we have this available for people who come here. So, take advantage of it. And I think they were glad I was there because I only went one time, and this time they had a nameplate for me
Oh, my.
with Conejo Rec and
Wow.
Park on it. So I thought, okay, I guess I'm not bothering them because I'm not one of the hotel people. But so that's a new little project of mine.
Oh, very nice. Thank you. Director Orozco.
Great, thank you. Let me see. Since our last meeting, I attended the Community Consciousness Mardi Gras Ball as well as the Senior Concerns Gala. Both were really wonderful and well-attended events, and it was great to see others in the community out to support both really wonderful organizations. let's see, I also did a site visit at the Goble and Old Meadows. And those were really fun to see all of the different activities going on at the Goble Center and better understand what our staff does at Old Meadows. So, yeah, that was a pretty full past month for me.
Thank you. Director Buss.
I went to the same galas with you guys. It was really fun. And then I don't know, I feel like I forgot that we had the field trip and I didn't look that far back in my calendar, but oh, did I already go over the Conejo Youth? And yeah, I went over that last time. So no, I think that's it for me right now.
Thank you. Director Heffer.
I attended or I sat in at the, with the Global Senior Commission. They were holding their interviews for, I believe it's 4 new commissioner spots. And I don't know how the 2 ladies were able to come to a decision because there were some great candidates that they were choosing from. And I'm assuming somewhere in the next month or so will be coming to us for final approval, but some great candidates for that position. There were 1 or 2 maybe weren't so great, but no, good people. And I mean, some of their backgrounds, these are people coming out of business and industry and professionals and still giving of their time and wanting to get involved with the commission is pretty incredible. Spending a lot of time over at the community meeting room at Conejo Creek South. And I do have to give a shout out to John and to Caitlin. They rescued us Monday morning. I wasn't there, but Monday morning, the tax people went into the building and the internet was gone. We've been averaging 50 to 60 people a day. They managed to somehow get through about 10 or 12 clients that day with the internet down. But the next morning, John and Caitlin, along with the help from the senior volunteer program, managed to scare up a satellite connection and get us back up and running. So we had full service Tuesday through Thursday. And John came out, were you there early this morning before no, John was out like at 7 o'clock this morning, putting the satellite dish up on top of the building there so that people wouldn't be tripping over the wires. But what they accomplished in just 24 hours was pretty amazing. So be sure to give Mark a hard time about not being there while all this was going on. But we do thank you and John for everything you did. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, aside from the events we all went to, which was very nice, always like to go to those. My activities on March 11th, 12th, and 13th were related to the California Association of Rec and Park Districts. We had a board meeting on the 12th, and then we had our legislative outreach in Sacramento, excuse me, on the 11th, legislative outreach on the 12th, and then we had a follow-up meeting on the 13th. The advocacy day for legislation, there's about 12 of us or so. And we have an agenda that's prepared by our consulting lobbyists, depending on how you want to look at that, where they have reviewed the pending legislation and determined, which would be the appropriate legislators to talk to and about what topics. And so then we go through this. They gave us a little talking point. And amazingly enough, the core theme this time was Quimby Act. And there is a one key piece of legislation, Senate Bill 313, introduced by Senator Grayson, who's up in the Bay Area, where they're basically trying to pull apart this, and because of the developer fees, and they're trying to put it in the developer fee category as opposed to where it's originated, which is in the Subdivision Map Act, as a Quimby fee, which is a dedication of land. And then in lieu of, if you can't do that, then you provide a fee. But they just see, a lot of time legislators just hear that it's a fee. So we've had a lot of conversation about it. And one of the things that our meeting on the 13th had to do with was how do we propose certain language to try and get this Senate bill either that we oppose it or we can get the language change where we can support it. And this is a dance that goes on back and forth for months at a time. But interesting enough, they came to find out that one of the reasons they were objecting to the fees was because the proponent of the bill was indicating that they were having to pay fees up to $100,000 as opposed to ours, which was like $12,000. Well, so they dug a little further and found out that was in the city of Sunnyvale. And so when you look at where some of these cities are located, I mean, you're in the heart of Silicon Valley there. Real estate is very, very expensive. And they're trying to, keep up with everything. And if they're going to supply them with parks, they need a lot of money to do that. So part of our educational effort is like, well, everybody doesn't charge $100,000. It's all relative. And so, that's part of what we do is we don't go into these meetings with the legislators and, start convincing them of anything. This is just like a meet and greet. Hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm at this district. We have this concern, our people will talk to your people. Have a nice day. See you later. And so that's kind of the process that we take going through this effort. But they're all very receptive, and almost every single one of them is like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was an issue. Or I've never heard of the special park district. What is that all about? So it's continue. And when you have assembly members that are rotating every 2 years, it's a constant process. So that's what we're doing, is just educating them on what a park district is, what a special district is, what Quimby fees are. And you think if you tell them once, no, you got to tell them again. So that's all we do, is we just go up there and just make our presence known. And then, like I said, the lobbyist will take it from there. And then our meeting on the 13th was it was like a huddle up after our outreach. Okay, what did we learn? What do we need to make as our message? So then the lobbyist has all the contacts. They all know who to contact about what, but what they don't have is the message. And so that's when they rely on the representatives, or in this case, I lean on our general manager, or I know Melissa Smith is very active with the legislative group as well, and say, okay, what are those key points that we really need to get to, that we can start talking, literally to get into the weeds on these things. So that's what the whole effort is, and we just do this every year to try and get those key issues. When there are 2,500 bills introduced in a year, and you try to get down to our top 5 or 10 that we want to talk about, it is very, very difficult. And I give kudos to our legislative advocates who do a great job on that. And then we just give them the details. We know what the talking points are, so we just give them that information. We found it to be very beneficial. We've made some great headway over the last couple of years, and I think we'll continue to do even more so this year. We were able to meet with Assemblymember Juan Carrillo, who's the Assembly Local Government Committee, the chair, and his district is 39 out in Palmdale. We also met with Assemblymember Diane Pappen, who's the chair of the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. She's out of San Mateo. Again, she wasn't familiar with the park districts, and even though her committee says parks in it, it's really like state parks. It's not really local parks, but we knew that she was going to be favorable for parks, and she is. So that's how they kind of target, who we speak to. And then we also met with some of the staff members as well. And then lastly, after all this was over, I walked over to Senator Stern's office, even though I knew that he was not in the office because he was down here in his district. But I just thought I'd stop in and say hello, and had a wonderful conversation with his chief of staff, Brandon Murphy. Very energetic guy, very amenable to our concerns, and was happy to talk. And I invited him to stop by at some time, since he's down in the district at least twice a month, I believe. But again, just very productive time. And I've said this before, but I was always questioning the value of going to the state capital for things that affect a local park district. And the more time I spend up there, the more I realize how valuable it really is. That you get to talk with key people or learn what their concerns are, and share those concerns. And you can see how it really can be quite effective. And we've been able to accomplish some very significant issues. So looking forward to continuing working with the group. Thank you for indulging my conversations here. So that's my report. Any questions? I know it's got a lot of stuff there. Yes, Director Huffer?
Not a question, just a thank you for taking this on. You know, we all get, not we all, I know I get sort of insular, you know, we think about Thousand Oaks or maybe this portion of Ventura County. But to have you up there talking with the legislators, with the staff, sharing information with others in the same position as you're in, is invaluable. So thank you very much for doing that on behalf of our entire board.
Thank you. And I also want to give a shout out to, again, Jim and Melissa, because, you know, when they ask for this information, I go, well, I know we have that information, but I don't know what it is. Jim, can you give me, you know, so I kind of know what the topics are, but they're very quick to it. And especially with Melissa Smith's background with MRCA and working with the state level. You know, there's not many issues that come up that they can't lean on Conejo Rec and Park for some answers. And that's, again, a very good asset that we can provide to them, and they know who to call. So thank you to you and the team for that. Okay, we'll move on to item 12, request for status reports and items for subsequent agendas. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to item 13. Do I have anybody waiting? Okay, please, if you'll welcome them to the Zoom meeting. Okay, Aaron, as soon as you get the chance, please speak up so we know you're there. Aaron, are you with us on Zoom? Aaron, are you still with us? Okay, well, staff is looking at that, and it's not something we can really address at public comments, but staff is looking at it, and they want to provide, Aaron, if you're still listening, if you want to provide some contact information, staff can certainly get back to you with that. So thank you for joining us this evening. Okay, and with that, I'll if the general manager would announce our closed session before we adjourn this portion.
Minutes. Yes, tonight we have a need for a closed session conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54.957.6. District reps will be General Manager Friedel, Management Services Director Smith, and our outside counsel Adriana Guzman Esquire relative to labor negotiations with Service Employees International Union. Represented employees regarding salaries, schedules, fringe benefits were unrepresented as well. So no announcement is expected, and we are going to go in the other room.
Okay, so as we move to the executive closed session, I just want to adjourn this portion of our meeting in recognition of Ed Holt, who's the spouse of a former director, CRPD Director Susan Holt, and also Terry Gillette, spouse of former CRPD Director Dennis Gillette. Unfortunately, we lost both of them just in the recent weeks, and they will be missed. I know they were, even though they were spouses, they were a key part of the CRPD family. So we will miss them, and our hearts and prayers go to Susan and Dennis. So with that, we'll adjourn to our executive closed session.